So what got me started traveling in the first place? Well, this was about 5 years ago. Well, in fact, it was 2014. It was the very first time I decided to travel around the world. And I chose to travel to Ukraine. And at that time, Ukraine was at war with Russia over the Crimea region. And at that time, everybody told me not to go. I mean, everybody. And where I come from in Canada, there are a lot of Ukrainians, and those Ukrainians were still telling me not to go to Ukraine, but I really wanted to. I really wanted to get away because I felt a bit of anxiety, or I felt sort of this craziness inside me, this motivation to get on an airplane and travel somewhere. And so that's what I did. I got on an airplane, and it was one of the most surreal events in my entire life. And it was one of the main reasons why I'm probably traveling now. You know, the first day that I came off of the airplane, no one spoke any kind of English. Like, no one. In Ukraine, they don't really know English very well. I had to navigate through the English or the language barrier a little bit, and I had someone guide me through Ukraine. And Ukraine is not a country that I advise to be your very first trip unless you know someone that can guide you through the country. You know, the very first day that we went there, and I have to tell you this story because it really set things in motion for me, and it really gave me insight about some of the things that I'm missing out in the world. The first day we went to this place, it was the woman that I was with that showed me Ukraine. She said, we're going to go see some caves and we're going to go see a church. And I thought, okay, caves and church, that's a good plan for a first day. Let's go do that. And we're walking along, and you can tell that Ukrainians are very religious, or there's a large segment of Ukrainians. And I really could get this sort of somber feeling in the country because while the country was at war, I think a lot of people were also very sad at this moment in time. Anyways, we get to the church, and she said, we're going to go to the caves. And I'm like, well, why? We just got to the church. Why? What do you mean we're going to go see caves? Like, why don't we go look at the church? And we get there, and I'm looking around, and this is just this beautiful, amazing place in Ukraine. This church was just so nice and old. But then I realized that this isn't like any other church that I've ever been to. So we go inside, and I realize at that moment that these churches were built on top of these caves. And it's like, this isn't like any church that I've ever seen in Canada. It's a very weird place. And so my mind starts going off like, where are we? What is this place? Why is it important? I know nothing about this place at all. And so they said, well, no phone, no technology, no pictures, no nothing, just you. And so what they did is they gave me a candle, they put it in between my hands, and they basically said, okay, now you can go, and they lit the candle up, and we would go down. And so I'm thinking, like, what is this place? Why am I here? Where are we going? And we start going down and down and down and down, deeper and deeper. And the very first thing I saw was a type of priest. He was sitting there with his beads, and he had his cross in his hand, and he was praying, and he was doing all of this. I looked that way, and then you can only look two ways. There's left and then there's right. And you turn right, and I see another woman, and she's doing this, and then she goes down and she kisses this thing, and I go, what is that all about? Okay. So I go over there, and I realize what I'm in is in the wall, they've carved out pieces into the wall, and those pieces are where these dead bodies are, basically. And I'm like, okay, now this is weird. So they built a church on top of these caves where dead bodies are underneath in these caves. And I'm really, at this point, I'm just like really in shock. I'm like not sure what it is that's going on. What is this place? Why was it built? Like all of those kinds of questions. None of those questions were answered until after I was done. But we get up to the next coffin, and you can see through the coffin because it's a glass coffin. And inside the coffin, you can see the hand. And body's covered up, but you can see half of the hand. And the girl that I was with, or the woman I was with, she points down and she says, look. And, you know, it didn't dawn on me at the moment that I saw that. And this is really important part of the story because I was really confused about where I was in the first place, let alone figuring out what it is that I'm looking at. And she points at the hand, and I go, okay. And we're walking around through these caves, and you can see areas that were built where these people would live. I couldn't imagine anybody living there. And above those coffins, you could also see some really old paintings. The paintings must be, I would say, just really, really old paintings of the people that were buried there, and Greek lettering and everything that just kind of, it's just really odd to see there. So we get out and we get into this area, and I'm sitting down. I sit down, and it's a bright sunny day, like a day like today, and I sit down, but I'm just really confused about what I just watched. And the woman that I was with, she sits down and she says to me, "What's wrong?" or to the effect of like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I don't really know what it is that I just experienced. Like, what is this place?" And she said, "Well, these ancient people, they built these caves. They dug the tunnels and they used to pray here and all of this. It's made up of monks and saints." But she said, "Do you remember the hand that I showed you?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, people come here and they pray to them, or they do something like this, because the bodies in those caves don't rot." Imagine that. A body didn't rot. And I didn't really think about it at that point in time, like when I saw the hand, but it's true. They're not mummified. These bodies aren't mummified. They're just sitting there. And they've been in these caves for over 1,000 years for sure. It's just insane to me, and it was such a weird thing. That church was probably built, I think, in the 1500s on top of those caves. And not once did the bodies rot in those caves. So that's my story, and that's what initiated me into the travel area, because you see, I think when we live our lives in a bubble in our homes, we don't realize what's out there for us to see. And remember, this is the very first time that I traveled around the world, and I was in just shock. So there you go, there's my story.